It's clear that the countdown has begun. It's clear that the upcoming summer will be the toughest ever since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. What happened in the Strait of Hormuz a few hours ago isn't just a temporary closure, but rather a well-planned Iranian trap. It exposed the weakness of Epstein's alliance. What is the secret behind this strength that Iran has? How did Iran deceive the American fleet with just one test tanker? Today, in reality, the map has changed. What was once impossible has become a reality imposed by this million-strong Iranian army, and it's clear that we are about to enter the most dangerous week in the history of this conflict. How is that? That's what we will reveal today. We'll be right back after the break. Stay with us. Dear Mujahideen, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. Welcome to our renewed meeting today, God willing, in this episode of the Opinion Series, which we always dedicate to following the latest developments and updates of this global conflict taking place in the Middle East between Iran and the Epstein alliance. Before that, I apologize for the poor quality of my voice today as well. I'm suffering from a slight cold that has affected my voice, so I decided to connect with you again through this episode. Because there are new developments and there are truly exciting updates that happened today regarding this issue of the conflict between Iran and the Epstein alliance. Between yesterday and today, dear Mujahideen, there have really been some remarkable developments. Because after the agreement to stop the war in Lebanon as well, in our countries, after the Iranian condition for continuing this truce was fulfilled, which is to stop the war in Lebanon, Iran also moved to fulfill its promise regarding this truce, which is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz again. But as usual, always according to the specific maritime routes imposed by Iran, and of course after paying the fees that Iran imposes on this travel. So it was supposed to be, after this Iranian step which came in response to these positive developments, that there would be another positive development from America. The most important of these developments, for example, is lifting the maritime blockade on Iran, which America announced earlier. And here, pay close attention, dear viewers, because even though Iran does not necessarily need the lifting of this maritime blockade, even though Iran has specific maritime routes that we talked about in one of the previous episodes, maritime routes, Iranian ships were able to leave the area safely without any interference from American forces. However, after these positive developments, Iran was expecting another positive step in return from America. So it's clear today that Iran tested how America would respond to these developments. Because today it sent an oil tanker through normal shipping routes as if nothing had happened to see what would happen, and that's what happened. And this Iranian tanker received warning signals from America preventing it from leaving the Gulf of Oman. Which means that America is still imposing a naval blockade on Iran. So Iran picked up this signal as proof that America is still imposing a naval blockade on Iran, even though Iran had done all of that. Yesterday, it announced the complete opening of the Strait of Hormuz and other measures. So what did Iran do today? Today, Iran made a decision to close the Strait of Hormuz again. Iran, through statements from its officials, sent a clear and very strong message. As long as the United States does not guarantee the complete freedom of movement for ships to and from Iran without any obstacles, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed as it was. So today Iran has started implementing a new system in the Strait of Hormuz. And this actually means that whether this war continues or stops, the situation has changed. There is now a new system in place in the Strait, imposed by Iran as a matter of fact, because before this war, for years, Iran had been warning, saying, Beware of any war against Iran. We will change the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. And everyone was talking about this scenario. What if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz? What will happen to the world? So the problem lies with America and with the Epstein coalition in general. They were short-sighted. They didn't believe things would reach this point, with the entire system in the strait being changed. They were always talking about an energy crisis, a rise in gas and oil prices in international markets for its duration, just throughout this war. So Trump took control of Venezuelan oil, thinking that by doing so he would save the world from any severe oil shortage that might result. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran for a certain period of time. But he didn't realize that the problem was bigger than that, which is that the real change is what Iran is doing today by imposing a new system on the Strait of Hormuz, even if this war ends. Imposing passage only through specific routes, prior coordination with the Iranian authorities, meaning that passage requires prior permission, preventing ships linked to the Epstein coalition involved in this aggression from passing, and finally, imposing fees on these ships belonging to friendly countries. The Epstein coalition wanted through this war to even target Iran. So Iran turned the system upside down in the Strait of Hormuz, and this new system will continue even if this war ends with a new agreement with America. At that point, Iran will return. By allowing all ships to pass, a complete opening of the strait, but under the same conditions, which are of course paying the fees, obtaining prior permission, and the right to inspect the ships. The equation in the region has completely changed. I mean, what's important is that today Iran is closing the Strait of Hormuz again, just a few hours after reopening it. And this suggests that this crisis the world is witnessing, the energy crisis, may continue for many months. Today the European Union countries have started sounding the alarm, but why? Because there is a very serious situation that the EU countries will suffer from, and all countries in the world without exception will suffer from it. And here we are specifically talking about jet fuel. As for kerosene, the director of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, said that kerosene supplies are only enough for 6 more weeks if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. 6 weeks, which means we're talking about roughly a month and a half. Therefore, there is now a crisis that has begun to threaten all European airports. Especially since this deadline, or this stock, will run out exactly at the beginning of June, which means at the start of the school and summer holidays, which is the period Europe is known for. And perhaps for many other countries outside of Europe, this means a significant increase in tourism activity, with tourists traveling by plane and so on. So this crisis, just so everyone knows, has already started, because there are airlines that are no longer able to buy kerosene. With these new high prices. Because their operations depend on low-cost flights, they can't raise ticket prices enough to cover this increase in kerosene prices. That's why, for example, Lufthansa, the German company, has started cancelling some regional flights because of what's happening today in the Strait of Hormuz. And here we're only talking about the rise in kerosene prices, but in about a month and a half you won't find kerosene at all in a number of European airports. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed today, of course, then there's no limit to the consequences of closing the Strait of Hormuz. It mainly affects the prices of 2 products, primarily the price of kerosene, which is jet fuel, then the price of diesel comes second. Meanwhile, the impact on gasoline, or petrol, is somewhat limited compared to diesel and kerosene. And the problem, dear viewers, just so everyone knows, is also related to time, because there's a distance from the Gulf to Europe. Meaning, even if the Strait of Hormuz is open today, that doesn't mean the problem will be solved today, or tomorrow, or even after a week at all. Oil tankers, for example, need more than 20 days to reach one of the German or Dutch ports or elsewhere, meaning that every day that passes, this means the continuation of this crisis for one more day beyond the next 20 days and so on. And today, 75% of jet fuel in Europe comes from the Gulf region. And the problem is that European countries were suffering from this crisis and from rising prices because of the sanctions they are imposing on Russia. They were already in trouble, but today the crisis has doubled because of the Strait of Hormuz. And the problem is also that all European countries have storage tanks that are enough for 3 months of diesel and gasoline. But for kerosene, they have small tanks that are only enough for a month or a month and a half, maybe even less. Today, Europe is divided into two parts. There are countries that import all their kerosene from abroad, like Britain, Germany, and the Netherlands, and there are countries that produce kerosene, like Spain. That's why this crisis doesn't pose a major threat to Spain, while it poses a very serious threat to the other countries. And fortunately for these countries today, they do have some alternative oil supplies from America, Algeria, or Nigeria. But all these countries combined cannot cover what comes through the Strait of Hormuz. They cover only a very small, limited part of the international demand, about 20%, so the crisis cannot be completely avoided. Therefore, as this crisis continues in the Strait of Hormuz, or if it returns again to the Strait of Hormuz, it is expected that the crisis will continue in all countries of the world. And I believe that the tourism activity this summer will be the worst since the COVID crisis. Many airlines will cut service to many destinations, and airline tickets will rise significantly, which may make travel impossible for some and perhaps only accessible to those who can afford it. So the dangerous thing today for the Epstein Alliance is not only this decision to reclose the Strait of Hormuz, but the real danger is that time is running out quickly. The Epstein truce period, if agreed upon, is nearing its end. It will end next Wednesday in 2 or 3 days, and the negotiations have reached a dead end, which means that the war will return again at that time, and Iran will resume striking the strongholds of the Epstein Alliance in all the countries of the region. The Iranian forces said yesterday that they are now 100% ready for any new round of war, and this is a strong indication. This means that Iran needed this truce to reorganize its ranks, and it's clear that now it really has become ready. Today, Iran said it will not participate in the negotiations, meaning in the second round of negotiations, because these negotiations have become a waste of time. That's what they said. Why? Because Trump is still talking about things that are no longer relevant, things that were before this war. Today, there is a new reality, and it's no longer possible to negotiate about them at all. At a time when everyone was expecting negotiations to start tomorrow, Sunday, it seems that these negotiations have become impossible. This means that everyone now has to prepare for another phase. The war will return again, and it will return starting next week. Trump made statements saying that if these negotiations fail, he will resume bombing Iran and that he will steal Iran's enriched uranium by military force. But statements like these are probably not taken seriously, nor do they cause any fear among the Iranians, because Iran knows very well how things are going today. The return of war is not in the interest of either America or the Gulf countries, and the talk about stealing enriched uranium is just talk, mainly media talk for media consumption only. America tried twice and failed miserably to achieve that. The first time was by the US military. They lost soldiers' lives and lost more than $1 billion, meaning the value of military equipment like aircraft and so on. And the second time, they were about to fall into the same disaster again. So Iran proved that it is not Venezuela, and it proved that it is impossible to carry out any successful special operation deep inside Iranian territory. Trump is talking about pure fantasy, really. I mean, Trump doesn't even respect the minds of the American people. Because, for example, he said he would send a large number of excavators to Iran to dig underground tunnels that reach the Fordow nuclear facility. As if the country is completely infiltrated and collapsed and has no forces on the ground, even though, and we've said this over and over again, the Iranian army is a 2 million strong army, and the Iranian volunteers have reached a number above. I think today it's 14%, and they haven't even succeeded in carrying out a swift operation that lasts just a few minutes. So what about excavators that work for long hours or even days? Trump's statements are really strange because he talks as if he's addressing children, little kids, or people who aren't rational. I mean, yesterday he came out with 7 consecutive lies, and today he's making other false statements too. Every day he comes out with contradictory, strange statements and lies. So now we'll see how things develop in the next few hours. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. See you next time.